This is Delta Mission Control at T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Main engine ignition. And liftoff of the United Launch Alliance Delta IV rocket carrying WGS-4 for the United States Air Force. The wideband global SATCOM satellite provides significantly increased capacity to our joint warfighters and Australian international partners. You're hearing the voice of Steve Agate providing launch vehicle ascent data.
Good. Chamber pressures beginning to decline in the solid rocket motors as expected. Seconds, Mach 1. Vehicle now going transonic.
Vehicle has now reached Mach 1.
Very stable. Chamber pressure in the main engine.
At the speed of sound.
As we're passing 45 seconds into the flight. Coming up 50 seconds. Mark 50 seconds. Max Q. Maximum dynamic pressure in the vehicle. Altitude now passing 7 nautical miles. Passing the 1 minute mark. Solid burnout expected about 30 seconds from now. Altitude now coming up on 10 nautical miles. Velocity 3,485 feet per second. Downrange distance 6.9 nautical miles. 1 minute, 17 seconds in. Chamber pressure holding very well in the main engine. Passing 1 minute, 25 seconds. 10 seconds away from solid burnout. Have burnout, standing by for SEP. And we have separation. Before solid motors have separated from the vehicle. The Delta IV rocket only now weighs 1/2 of what it did at launch, expelling propellant at around 1,850 pounds per second. Coming up on the 2 minute mark.
This is Delta Mission Control.
2 minutes into the flight.
L plus 2 minutes, 3 seconds into the flight. The Delta IV WGS-4 mission is 2 minutes into the flight. Steve Agate just confirmed jettison of the 4 solid rocket motors, and the mission is continuing as expected. Our next event is payload fairing jettison, scheduled to take place in less than 2 minutes from now. Let's go back to Steve Agate.
Good engine control on the first stage in pitch and yaw. Minutes, 40 seconds in, still looking good. Altitude 46 nautical miles, velocity 8,679 feet per second, downrange distance 75 nautical miles. Next major event is the separation of the payload fairing less than 30 seconds from now. Passing 3 minutes, 10 seconds. Altitude now passing 61 nautical miles. Good engine control on the first stage. Standing by for fairing SEP. And we have fairing separation. Minutes, 40 seconds in. Altitude now 79.2 nautical miles. Velocity 14,012 feet per second. Downrange distance 166 nautical miles. Coming up on the 4 minute mark. At that time we'll be toggling to the partial thrust mode. And we have the partial thrust command. Main engine chamber pressure decreasing to the partial thrust level. Standing by from MECO. And we have MECO, the main engine has cut off, standing by for stage separation. And we have separation. The first and second stages have separated. The NED speed is increasing. The nozzle is beginning to deploy, standing by for igniter spark. And we have igniter spark standing by for ignition, and we have ignition. Ignition on the second stage. Second stage chamber pressure beginning to rise. Good steady state value in the second stage. 4 minutes, 41 seconds in. Now beginning to recover.
This is Delta Mission Control at L plus 4 minutes, 47 seconds, mission elapsed time. The mission is continuing as expected. You just heard Steve Agate report the successful execution of the events comprising the early part of tonight's mission. The payload fairing was successfully jettisoned. The first stage main engine cut off. First stage was separated, and the second stage ignition began. We're now in the first of two planned second stage engine burns, and this burn will last just over 16 minutes, ending about 15 minutes from now. And I'm joined now by U.S. Air Force Captain Tim Tremello from the Air Force Wideband Global SATCOM program. Captain Tremello, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Don. It's a pleasure to be here for the launch of WGS-4.
Well, we've just seen a spectacular liftoff of the Delta IV vehicle with WGS-4 on board. So what are your thoughts so far as you see WGS-4 on its way to orbit?
You know, it's a great feeling to see the launch of this fourth satellite, especially knowing how important the constellation is to our troops in the field. Of course, you have to remember that the work is just beginning. Following separation of WGS-4 from the Delta IV launch vehicle, which will be about 35 minutes from now, our team will continue orbit-raising operations over the next 50 days. Following another 44 days of rigorous testing by Boeing and the Army, because Army Strategic Command actually operates the payload, the satellite will then reposition to its operational orbit over the course of another 40 days. So you can kind of see from that timeline that there's still a few months of hard work before we achieve fully operational status.
Well, Captain Tremello, I mentioned earlier that the WGS system provides an important increase in capacity over the legacy systems. Can you explain for us what this means for the warfighters in the field?
Sure, Don. In order to illustrate that point, I'd like to discuss three key capabilities of WGS and how it's a significant upgrade from its predecessor, the Defense Satellite Communication System, also known as DSCUS. First, WGS adds high-capacity send and receive Ka-band capability in addition to the X-band service already provided by DSCUS. However, the system still provides the Global Broadcast Service Mission, or GBS, which is sort of like DirecTV for the warfighter via X-band. Second, by incorporating a digital channelizer, WGS provides seamless communication into and out of theater, as well as cross-banding between X-band and Ka-band. This means that users can communicate with each other, even if they're operating in different frequencies. Finally, WGS is able to communicate with airborne intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, or ISR, platforms, meaning it has the capability to provide communications to multiple remotely piloted aircraft, while also providing service to many other users at the same time.
Well, the WGS satellite must be quite advanced to be such a game changer for the Department of Defense. Can you describe some of the unique capabilities of the satellite?
Don, just to put it in perspective, one of these WGS satellites has the equivalent capacity of the entire DSCUS constellation. This system provides voice, data, and commanding at roughly 10 times the rate previously available to an increased number of users. Those users include ground forces, U.S. embassies, and airborne assets, which in today's war are key capabilities. The bottom line here, Don, is that WGS enables more users to get more information faster, and that's what keeps us ahead of the enemy.
Well, that's great insight. Thank you, Captain Tremello. I appreciate that insight. And while we wait for our next mission event, SECO 1, or Second Stage Engine Cutoff, number 1,